Back during my earlier days of playing World of Warcraft, I was prodded by other guild members into playing another game that had come around that time. Well, Burning Crusade did happen to be annoying me right around that time, so I decided to play, by purchasing the Collector's Edition and then logging in to punch my guild leader in the face. A month later, when my guild members all went back to WoW, I did not, as I was finding I liked the game much more than World of Warcraft. Unfortunately, my graphics card did not like the game nearly as much, and a patch rendered an annoying bug in a text, so I let my count lapse, and I'd always hoped to be able to get back to the game someday. So imagine my surprise when I find out that a few years and a few expansions later, the game I've always wanted to get back into was announced it was going free-to-play. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Lord of the Rings Online. Developed by Turbine and published initially by Midway until the company went under, Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO as the cool kids say, is a 3D fantasy MMO which is, of course, heavily based on World of Warcraft. I mean Lord of the Rings, of course. Sorry, you'll understand pretty soon. The story of LOTRO follows the story of the books. Before you ask the very justified question of, how, the game follows the story of the free peoples of Middle-earth who are fighting against the armies of the Witch King, given side stories to the original story, interacting occasionally with known characters while remaining as faithful to the books as possible. You're not going to be leading a raid against Sauron in case that had you worried. Or excited. Okay, let's move on. The graphics in this game are done in a realistic style with many earthen tones and textures. Wow, nice to say that for a change. The environments are as close to Earth as you can get. Much like the settings in the books and movies, all areas seem pretty plausible. There'll be no floating islands or multicolored landscapes here. The game looks about as nice as you'll want it to, with more realistic character models than Warcraft, and a whole slew of option settings. If you have the PC to run it, the sights can be amazing, and strangely enough, it runs pretty smooth on my machine, even with a lot of the higher graphics options in place. A gripe about this game I hear occasionally is the game's horrible character animations, to which I say, what game are you playing? Okay, to be fair, if your computer is detected with lower-end settings, the graphic option Animation Smoothness is set to low. Anything less than high looks outright horrendous. Make sure to max out that option if the running characters look a bit stiff. One major bit of praise I have to give to this game is its day and night system. Unlike WoW, the day and night system is accelerated and not in real time. The plus side to this is that there is a general difference in how the game looks from night to day. When it gets dark, and really adds to the atmosphere. Certain areas of the game have their own lighting, which can be oddly jarring but still add to the ambience of the area, like a dusk-like fog over the marshes or the pitch-black lighting of the Goblin Village and Blackwold camps. It's the difference between night and... I'm not making that joke. This game packs another fantastic soundtrack, when you get to hear it. Similar to how World of Warcraft only occasionally play music, it's heard more often when entering new areas and towns, and it's the exact same case here. Tracks provide atmosphere and really don't scream out at you, but they're also used very effectively. This game also features one of my favorite intro tracks in any MMO, second only to the original World of Warcraft intro. It's another varied soundtrack, too. There's simple jigs and booming orchestral swells. Here's a couple examples that I won't be using as background music. An interesting fact about this game is that it's composed of the idea of using instruments and musical styles that were outlined in the books, and unquestionably makes this title far more immersive. Another plus to the immersion factor is the sound, as it's also done very well. Sword strikes, bow pulling, and arrow hits, while exaggerated, still sound a bit more real and brutal. When the day-to-night changes occur, you'll hear things like owls, wolves, or crickets as the dusk settles in and night continues onward, and birds chirping when the morning comes back around. Inns in this game seem much more lively, and in addition to teaming with NPCs, there's even a lot of background chatter to go with it. One of the more painful sounds you'll hear is if you take a long fall. Oh my god! Sure beats the hell out of Warcraft's simple noise from deterring me from ever wanting to do that again. Alright, let's get started. Once you've signed up for an account and downloaded the game, you'll start the game from the launcher. Unlike many MMOs, the server list is contained within the launcher. You can choose between any of them, but since the move to free-to-play, the overseas servers have been merged with the North American ones. So be on the lookout for anything labeled FR, you'll be surrounded by people who only speak French. There's also the occasional roleplay supported server, labeled RP, and the former unofficial RP server, Landrevel, is being labeled RE, meaning roleplay there is encouraged, but not enforced. Once you've made the server choice, the game will load and take you to the character creation screen. With a free account, you are permitted to make 2 characters per server. You have the choice of 4 races in this game: human, elf, dwarf, and hobbit, each with their own strengths and abilities, as well as a starting instance. You may also choose between male and female for every race except the dwarf. Each race is also restricted to which classes they can play as. For example, humans can play any class in the game except for the Runekeeper, but I'll get more into this when I cover classes. Which will be right now. First on the list is the Burglar, a roguelike damage support class with a difficulty listed as Advanced, whose major role is using stealth and debuffing their targets. Only humans and hobbits can play as burglars. Next up, Captains, a unique melee support class skilled at buffing and summoning herald companions to join them in battle. They are listed as moderate difficulty, and only humans can play as this class. The next melee class listed is the Champion. If you've ever played a Fury Warrior or Combat Rogue in World of Warcraft, you've played this. Able to dual-wield weapons, this class involves purely dishing out the punishment, which is why they are listed as a basic difficulty. All races except the Hobbit can be champions. Another staple class is the Guardian, your basic difficulty, high-defense, sword-and-board tank. Just like the Protection Warriors of Warcraft, the class exists to take a beating and keep other people from having the same done to them. Any race can be a Guardian. Moving on into range damage is the Hunter class. If you're thinking this is like the Hunter class in World of Warcraft, you are wrong. This is Lotro's Mage class. Another basic difficulty class, you pick what you want dead and shoot it until it dies. Sure, there's some WoW Hunter-esque skills, but the Hunters in this game even get a skill that lets you teleport your entire party to a choice of cities, so yeah, they're the Mage class. Deal with it. Like the Guardian, the Hunter is available to all races. Now before you start pointing at me and yelling that the Mage class in this game is the Lore Master, okay, you're kinda right. But they're more in tune with WoW's Warlock class, focusing on debuffing and support and having a pet to support them. Lore Masters are an advanced class available only to humans and elves. The game's healer is the odd class of the Minstrel. Music is literally the weapon, as each spell is played on a various sets of instruments of the minstrel's choosing. If you've ever wanted to kill a boar by playing a jaunty tune on a horn, you have found your game. Listed as moderate difficulty, any race can rock out as a minstrel. The final 2 classes are pay-to-play classes, which, since this is a free-to-play MMO show, I won't go into too much detail over, but if you're interested, here goes. First is the Runekeeper, who's available only to dwarves and elves, and who can choose to be a damage dealer or healer in each fight, unlocking more skills in either style depending on how much they use them. And lastly, the Warden, a ranged tank, if that even begins to make sense. They wield javelins and shields, and are available to all races except the dwarves. Once you've selected your race and class, you can choose from a pre-selected set of faces, hairstyles, and colors, and facial details, as well as a slider that lets you set the overall bulk of your character. The skin tones and eye colors you can choose depend on which region of Middle-earth you decide to make your character from. Then, of course, choose a name for your character. There's a guideline on the bottom left for helping you choose a name and how a Middle-earth name would sound, even going as far as telling you what names would come from what region of Middle-earth. You can also just hit the randomizer and let it do the work for you. This is all very helpful for the RP servers, but the regular servers are filled with people who have more unique names. Alright, hit create and you'll be instantly sent to that race's starting story instance where you interact with a character from Lord of the Rings. For example, humans have Strider break them out of jail, while elves follow Elrond through a city under siege. Here's where the game will break down how to play it, and it'll do a better job of telling you than I will. Now, if you've played World of Warcraft, a lot of this is going to sound pretty familiar to you. I'm not going to assume that everyone has played that game, though, but here's a list of a lot of things that are similar. Each race is a hometown, there are game tips on the loading screens, you get a spell that returns you to a milestone that can only be used once an hour, there are treasure boxes scattered around the map, the interface looks the same, the armor and the weapons degrade upon death or constant use, which is alerted to you by a paper doll icon that must be repaired by specific NPCs. You must visit a class trainer every level or so to purchase new abilities, and the first person to attack a monster gets credit for defeating it. There, let's continue. Basic movement is using WASD to move, space to jump, and the mouse to interact with the action bars, windows, NPCs, and enemies. Steering with a keyboard seems kinda squirrely and loose and might take some getting used to. You can target with a single click or initiate auto attack on an enemy with a right click, or do the same to speak with an NPC. The quest system is done in a typical MMO style and with similar style to Warcraft. All quests are marked with a ring icon, and the color of the ring determines your progress or what type of quest it is. For example, a ring with a blue and white glow is an available quest, or the next step in a current quest. A silver ring is a quest that will become available at a higher level. A ring with a blue and red glow denotes a completed quest, and a flaming ring represents a story quest, which are usually long chains that may lead to instances or alternate versions of the same area. Like what happened in the third expansion of World of Warcraft, Lotro has what WoW refers to as phasing, where completing a certain quest or event will lead to an alternate version of that area. The foremost example will be the newbie area, which contains its own story, enemies, and environment, and changes slightly once you complete the opening quests. A feature WoW didn't consider was letting people from outside those phased areas interact, but Lotro counters this issue by allowing people in parties to join the party leader's phase, or dynamic layer. This lets you bring a friend into the original town Archit, while they may have already gotten to the ruined version of it. This game is loaded with quests. Every town or area you walk into is teeming with quests with multiple chains. I'd go as far as to say it's a bit of quest overload, especially once you move into the next town and find yourself there for several levels, while you still see new quests popping up. There's an in-game quest tracker that will highlight areas of your map where you can find the NPC to speak with or enemies to kill to complete that quest, but you can only track 5 quests at a time. The death penalty is handled a bit differently from many MMOs. You technically don't die as much as you retreat. This is why player hit points are referred to as morale rather than health. When you retreat, you appear in a safe area with a point of dread added to you. Dread affects your ability to fight by removing a bit of morale and attack power, so the more dread you have, the weaker you become. You can restore it with time and successful kills, though. There are various areas in the game where dread is automatically applied as long as you're in that area, so keep an eye out for that. Getting used to the rebranding of stat terms is important in learning this game. Besides calling HP morale and MP power, strength is called might here. Stamina is vitality, agility remains the same, intellect becomes will, and spirit is fate. Pay close attention to the description of each stat so you know how to equip your class accordingly. This game handles the grind in a completely different way, too. Major cities even have a task system you can use to gain reputation by turning in junk you find off of certain enemies for a bit of experience and reputation. You are limited to the amount of times you can perform them in a day, but have the option of resetting that counter in the cash shop. There's also deeds, which are similar to achievements, where you get titles and rewards for completing things like killing a number of enemies or using a certain ability repeatedly. Completing deeds will grant you player titles which you can equip to yourself, traits which you can use to customize your character's stats, and even Turbine points, which are the cash shop's currency. The amount of points you get is completely inconsequential to prices listed in the cash shop, so think of them as a discount. These points will carry over across account, but they can only be earned once per character, so once you complete Spider Slayer for 5 points on character A, and complete Spider Slayer on 5 points for character B, you'll still only have 5 points. If you think so many quest options will have you sailing through the game, you're wrong. Level progression hits a brick wall at level 10, you'll be finishing a ton of quests and exploring a bunch of different areas before you even see level 15. No joke, I spent nearly 13 hours in a row playing this game, and I only made it from level 10 to level 17. 13 hours in a row without eating. Never doing that again. That is a testament to this game's immersion factor, though. The progression is very gradual and doesn't overwhelm you with skills and abilities and lets you get more immersed into the title. The land is wide and vast, so getting around with that amount is infuriating. Luckily, you can get a gift pack from completing the newbie area, and one of those items is a temporary mount. In order to receive a permanent mount, you must either be a subscriber, reach level 20 and perform a quest that will allow you to purchase one, or you can buy the riding skill from the cash shop, which is luckily pretty cheap, and can probably be purchased fairly quickly by collecting D rewards. Similar to Luna, the box also contains other boxes that can be opened within reaching certain levels and contain prizes that will greatly help you when you're starting out. Otherwise, you'll be stuck using the Stable Masters to get around, the Lotro equivalent of Griffins. Unlike WoW, you can choose to get off these travel horses any time during the trip to save the pain of passing by a rare mining node or choosing the wrong area. The crafting system is similar to WoW, yet different enough to be worth mentioning. You're asked to choose from a preset trio of skills that complement each other. For example, Armorer focuses on armor creation, tailoring, and prospecting as the means to gather the materials. You can create the simple recipes given to you as long as you have the correct ingredients until you become proficient by filling the experience bar. This will allow you to work on the next skill level or master the previous one, where you'll gain the ability to create items of a greater quality or quantity. If you don't master the previous tier, you cannot master the next one. There's a lot of customization to your character for further immersion. My favorite additions are the Notary, where you can add a surname to your character for a fee, as well as annotate other players as your parent or children if you're that into roleplay. Another fun feature is the cosmetic outfits, where you can keep the look of any set of armor you can wear despite what you have currently equipped. You can go as far as purchasing additional slots for outfits or even custom outfits right from the cash shop if you feel so inclined. There's also a feature I've not seen in any other, one other MMO, but I like it better here. There's a system for playing musical instruments. You can purchase the instruments from certain vendors, but make sure the game will allow you to play them. Minstrels have free choice of any instrument as long as they reach a level restriction, but other classes are limited to the choice of 2 instruments. To start playing your instrument, type /music in the chat block after you've equipped whatever you wish to play. From there you can press numbers 1 through 8 on top of the keyboard to play different notes, as well as hold Shift, Control, or both to play with a pitch. Keep in mind that instruments are considered ranged weapons, so make sure to re-equip properly if playing as a ranged weapon class.
What the hell is that noise?
It's not noise, it's the music I'm playing.
It sounds terrible.
Look, I got like 8 keys to work with here. You telling me you can make anything coherent out of this? Show off. You know we're still recording, right? Moving on. There are communities out there that allow for very complex compositions, sometimes involving full bands of players. Check out thefatloot.com for instruction on how to convert or compose your favorite songs for Lotro. Speaking of communities, once again, if you've played World of Warcraft, you'll know what to expect from the people in this game. Some people are jerks, others are helpful, but many are just minding their own business. Interaction is done mostly through a chat box at the bottom of the screen. Each channel covers a certain topic, but you'll be hard-pressed to find people obeying those topics. While there's apparently a strong RP community, you'll notice the issue is in WoW, where the servers themselves are divided among the role players and non-role players with no real policing of the RP policies, from what I've seen. The PvP system in the game is there, just not in the form you'd expect. Sure, you can receive a duel request from other players, but there's no warring factions. For a player to participate in PvP, they'd have to head to a certain area of the world where they can encounter monster players. Since you have to subscribe in order to do monster play, I won't get into it, but if it interests you, it basically transports you into the body of various orcs and monsters that you can use to battle the real-world players. You don't really get to bother with much people outside of town, since it's rare when starting out that you'll ever need to party up with someone else. The few quests that I saw that claimed you needed multiple people to complete were easily soloed if you were just a level or two ahead, and could be completed with just a bit of caution otherwise. Even the game's instance system has you go it alone for most of the time, as you escort an NPC here or there. While there are other types of instances called skirmishes that grant rewards for completing them, but you must be level 30 to play them, and frankly, with the level progression being as slow as it is, I didn't have that kind of time. This game is something that can be played alone with very little issue, especially the earlier levels. There's one quick thing I want to touch upon, and that's the option of player housing. You probably won't see it for a while when you first start out, as player houses are extremely expensive and require an upkeep or a certain amount of money every day you own one. If you don't pay up, your house is foreclosed on. Harsh. If you're going to group up with people, you'll need to understand the rebranded terms again. In this game, groups or parties are called fellowships, and guilds are called kinships. Kinships are formed, again like in World of Warcraft, by purchasing a charter and getting a set number of people to sign it. In order to chat with your party or fellowship, type /F, and for your kinship, type /K. Speaking of chatting, the game has an interesting workaround for the all-too-common issue of mistells. When you receive a tell, you can click on the third tab on the bottom for the IM option, which will list all who've spoken to you. This way you can just click on the name of the person you're speaking to rather than automatically defaulting to the last person you spoke with. It's pretty convenient. Talking with other people may be confusing, as since the move to free-to-play, all the North American servers and the European servers have been merged. It's possible to come across players who don't speak English very well or communicate in their native tongue, so keep that in mind. At the very least, it allows me to play on the same server as a certain forgetful French songwriter. One final thing I want to touch upon is the auction house. Often the best way to make money in an MMO, you can find most of what you'd need here. The issue is that unless you pay for auction slots, you won't be able to sell anything on here. If you're trying to stay free, you're going to have to trade or sell items around towns. As you can see, there's a lot you could be paying for, so let's see what's worth it. Lotro's Cash Shop is ugly. It's a slow-loading mess of a store with a confusing layout and a completely chaotic point system. I've always felt that if you have to drop into more than 4 submenus to find what you're looking for, you're doing it wrong. But if you want to experience some of the better features in this game, you're going to need to be here. Click on Lotro Store to see what's inside. The first issue lies in Turbine points. Like I said before, you can earn a few in-game, but rarely are you going to be able to save up enough for what you'd want. The only real option to shop here is to purchase them. The major problem lies in how the currency translates. Many MMOs have a system that's easy to translate, 100 or 1,000 per dollar spent. Turbine points suffer from what I call Microsoft points syndrome, where the numbers don't match the cash equivalent in the slightest. For example, it costs $8 for 500 points and $20 for 1250 points. Even if there's often some sort of bonus amount given for those purchases, it still seems a bit high. Your first foray into the cash shop will come from a newbie quest. You'll be given 10 Turbine points to purchase an optional quest. If you agree to the point once, you will not be allowed to receive them again on any subsequent character. It doesn't really make for a good intro into the shop either, as it takes you right to the page you need to purchase the quest, but I suppose it's better than expecting you to find it on your own in there. You'll notice immediately that your bag space, while comparatively generous, just won't cut it. Bags can be purchased for your account and luckily will carry across all your characters. Keep in mind that subscribing to the game will grant you full bag access as long as you keep your account up. You'll probably notice your earned traits stacking up too, so in order for you to get your character more powerful, you may want to purchase additional slots when they become available. Thankfully, you can do that right from the trait screen if you feel so inclined. As I mentioned before, if you don't want to spend hours of your life just walking around the roads, you will need a mount. While you can realistically purchase the riding skill with your earned Turbine points, keep in mind that it will only unlock the skill for one character. On the plus side, it's pretty cheap and will allow you to purchase in-game mounts, so even dropping the lowest amount of money you can on the game should allow the skill on a few of your characters. You can also purchase rented mounts, but really the skill is more than worth it. One last thing to remember is access to the additional classes. You can click the coin on the character screen to purchase them if they sound like something you'd like to try out. Just remember that subscribing will grant you access to them as well, so decide what's the better buy for you. This may say free to play, but sooner or later you will have to pay for this game. If you want to see past level 65, you're going to have to go into the cash shop to purchase the Mines of Moria or Siege of Mirkwood expansions. Just keep in mind that Rise of Isengard is coming right around the corner. I liked this game for a reason when I first played it, and from what I see, not much has changed. This is the perfect game to play if your Warcraft subscription has lapsed. It will take a lot of commitment, but rest assured you'll have fun if you like 3D fantasy MMOs. Here's my final rating. I love how this game doesn't bombard you with things to do off the bat. It might seem a bit too gradual, but I prefer this to tossing me out into the world and hoping I catch on. And if you like taking things slower, this might be right up your alley. There are tons of varied quests to do, and it doesn't ever feel like you're really forced into the grind. This game can be highly immersive, and if you're a fan of how WoW plays, you'll feel right at home. Mostly purchase things that will make the game more convenient to play for you. Bags aren't a bad idea, and unlocking different perks and slots isn't a bad way to round out your points. You'll definitely want the writing skill as soon as possible though, and buying them out in the store isn't required, but there's some nicer options there. Of course, if you really like the game, subscribe to it and you'll bypass a lot of the inconveniences. If you want fast-paced, no-holds-barred action, look elsewhere. The game is much more calm and spread out and subdued than games like WoW. The battles themselves seem slower and clunkier than other recent MMO games as well. If you play MMOs to PvP, you will definitely want to look elsewhere, as the system is quaint, but easily not what true PvPers are looking for. Next time, I'll look into playing something not so involving. Enough of you requested this one, at least. Oh, and one last thing. With this episode, I officially announced the opening of MMOGrinder.net. Feel free to check there for new episodes, updates to what's been going on, and check out the list of suggested MMOs so you can see what's been suggested already, and let me know what interests you the most, or feel free to suggest something not on that list. Also remember to follow MMO_Grinder on Twitter if you want to keep up with show progress. Don't you know any other songs